Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Today we're taking a peek at a horror project I've been working on called A Dog in a Dark Place. And so before we get too far into things, remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Now, generally speaking, this is A Dog in a Dark Place. The premise of the game is simple: find the dog that resides somewhere in the darkness. Now, this project is actually part of a larger journey that's been going on for a long time now. And that journey is the pursuit to infinite procedural generation. See, it all started originally as a small action roguelike prototype called Infinite. It was a tile-based action roguelike dungeon crawler with a gimmick that the world would expand the further that the player would explore, and this generation would be based off player progression. Now, Infinite was a nice start, but due to time and ambition, the idea was scrapped once I knew that the idea was possible. Which brings us to some time later and A Dog in a Dark Place. It's an evolution of the Infinite concept, but improved and more sinister. See, A Dog in a Dark Place also generates its world as the player navigates it, but it also deletes part of it just the same, as we see here in some footage recorded during the early test phase of the project. Now, the secret behind the whole thing is pretty simple. The player never actually moves. Instead, the world around them does. Once they hit an edge, the world is expanded/deleted, then all positions are reset to give the illusion of an infinite setting. And this was done for one simple reason: disorientation. The darkness is a huge part of the horror aspect of this project. And personally, I find darkness scary, not because of the darkness itself, but what could be hiding within it. And generally speaking, navigating in the thick of darkness is terrible on its own. It's one of the many reasons I still haven't beaten Subnautica. So for this project, the world is constantly changing around the player as a deliberate attempt to mess with them. But that's just one of many ways that the game tries to deceive. Now, before we go any further, I need to explain that this was meant to be a publicly released game, but that idea was at the very least delayed due to a mixture of lack of time and development not really going as planned. Still, a lot of fun stuff was attempted that I wanted to showcase, so spoiler warnings just in case this does ever get released. Now, let's start with the meta purpose for the spooks. This game legitimately hates you. Everything you do, from moving to calling for the dog to simply existing, is monitored. And the more you exist, the hate grows and the frequency/severity of spooks increases. For example, fake dead pixels is just one of the many ways that the game may mess with the player. And without going into the technicals, dead pixels are literally when pixels on a monitor don't display, often due to hardware defects. And they're lovingly recreated as a spook in this project, but the attention to detail, I think, is what makes it nefarious. The game uses the player's display measurements to math out where a dead pixel would show up. So if the player switches from full screen to windowed, the pixel remains in the exact same place. Now, obviously, this couldn't extend to the player's actual display outside of the game, but considering the math needed to pull this off, it was a personal highlight. Other effects include deliberate screen tearing, which often comes off as subtle and just adds to that uneasy feeling. The screen may also glitch out with some nice chaotic analog style effects to accompany the event. And there's also events that mess with the player's controls, which can flip or rotate movement direction for a few seconds. But the final spook that I wanted to highlight was the in-game notifications. Now, it still needs some work, but the general premise was simple: set up an in-game text display system that would work similarly to those found in multiplayer games. And since this was a completely solo experience built on the idea of isolation, suddenly getting a notification that some stranger entered the game, or worse, is spamming that system that you had no idea even existed, well, that seemed pretty dang freaky, especially because using similar techniques to the dead pixels maintains consistent presence regardless of scale. And final fun fact, this was going to go so far as to refer to the player by name based on their computer username, and even possibly pull their PC spec data to be used in some form. So yeah, that's just a couple of the many spooks hidden in A Dog in a Dark Place. And trust me when I say that these are just a few that I was comfortable with unveiling, and there are some truly evil events left to be discovered. Generally speaking, while the project may never see the light of day, the amount of time, effort, and research that went into it has left me with a lot of new and improved knowledge. and it's definitely going to help in future projects. Again, not only was this a huge step forward in my attempts to create infinite procedurally generated worlds, but things like the dead pixel effect legitimately really helped me expand my knowledge and the potential for future projects. It's actually kind of exciting to really think about where these ideas will take us in the future. And you know, if this game does ever get released, well, you now know of a few things to look out for. So I would love to know what you thought of this project, and if you would like to see more showcases of other unfinished projects in the future. Really leave any and all thoughts in the comments. And speaking of game releases, I just recently released a Backrooms demake, which was a demake of another previous release, which itself is part of a number of releases that can be downloaded and enjoyed exclusively by my Patreon supporters. So if you would like to play some of the games I've created in the past or get early access to the weekly videos, consider subscribing. And with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.